Friday afternoon, Erev Shabbos, Parshat Chukas, June 17th, 1242. Corresponding to the day of the 20th of Sivan, 24 cartloads of the Jewish Talmud, each meticulously handwritten, are carted to the town square in front of the Notre Dame Cathedral and then ceremoniously set ablaze. A heinous act which plunged the Jews of France into mourning and effectively eradicated our greatest source of wisdom, of knowledge and Jewish practice from all of Europe. Eloquent keynotes are composed to commemorate and bemoan this event, some of which remain part of our Tisha B'Av service. And in many communities, this tragic date, the 20th of Sivan, is rightfully observed as a public fast day for many, many years. The person responsible for this act, this grave hate crime, was Louis XIV, the king, a man later canonized by the Catholic Church, and attesting to his heroic status at the center of the Plaza de Victoire, the Plaza of Victory, a short walk from the Notre Dame Cathedral. You'll find an equestrian monument of King Louis XIV riding heroically upon a horse. He is the namesake of the state of Louisiana, cities of St. Louis and Louisville, and hundreds of other locations and cities around the world. And Civil War monuments, other statues, and those of people who promulgated racist policies, kept slaves, or persecuted Native Americans, are currently being considered for removal. We, the Jewish people, have an opportunity to consider the Jewish attitude towards all of this. As the time-honored question goes, is it good for the Jews? You can imagine how painful it might be to see an oppressor, to see someone who gave you such a difficult time, who hurt you, who killed your people, who persecuted your people, to be memorialized favorably, to be enshrined and put in bronze and celebrated at the town square. To cause emotional pain to anyone is included within the prohibition of onaz dvarim, verbal oppression. At the same time, we're also aware that destroying statues to avoid further offense cannot and will not reverse the course of history. In addition, nuanced thinkers will all point out that there's a value to memorializing people and events whose legacy are complicated, where the good and the unsavory elements of their history live side by side. Hence the question that we deal with today in America. Our Sidra contains mention of what I would refer to as the very first statue that was eventually destroyed, eventually dismantled and taken down. The Parshat describes something called the Nechash and Nechoshes. Following a plague which ravaged the ranks of the Bnei Yisrael, Moshe is instructed to fashion a copper snake coiled around a pole. Vayas Moshe Nechash and Nechoshes vayasimeu al hanes. And whoever would look at the snake on the stick would be healed from their illness, the illness that was incurred as a result of a snake bite. And so you have this miraculous cure, an incredible treatment, which becomes eventually the universal symbol for medicine, emblazoned on the side of ambulances, hospitals, medical school halls throughout the world. The Nechash and Nechoshes became a cure not just for the Jewish people, but eventually the world. And it was a beloved monument. And people were obsessed with it. So much so that years later, Melech Chizkiyahu realized we had a problem. People were obsessing over this snake on a stick. They were obsessing over this cure that seemed to have been a universal panacea for all ailments, for all illnesses. So Chizkiyahu made a difficult decision. He decided he would grind that Nechash and Nechoshes, Kises Nechash and Nechoshes, down to smithereens. And the Chazal, you understand, were sensitive about this. This was a relic, this was a statue, this was a monument which didn't just memorialize a moment in history which was perhaps had many positive aspects, but it also had become a symbol, a time-honored relic and statue celebrated by the Jewish people for hundreds of years. And Chizkiyahu decided it was time to take down the monument. Vehodulo. And though it must have been hotly debated, the Chazal looked at Chizkiyahu's actions and they said, Yesher Kochacha, good job. You were correct to grind down the Nachash and Nachoshes to get rid of this statue. Why? The question is, why was it good that Chizkiyahu destroyed this monument? The Gemara explains elsewhere that it had become an obsession. It had become a god within its own right to some people in the Jewish people. They would look at this copper monument, they would look at this snake wrapped around, coiled around a rod, and they would say, this is our source of salvation, of healing. When people start to obsess over something to such an extent, and they forget about God, then it was time to take the monument down. When do we take monuments down? When all you could do is look at that monument. When it takes on a symbolic nature and a life of its own, then it's appropriate to take it down. But Chazal are teaching us something very important. We exaggerated the significance of the statue. We turned the monument into something that was more important than it really was. We gave it more credence and more kavod than it deserved. But if monuments are just reminders of historical events, if they don't shape our values, then perhaps they're no different than many other unpleasantries which fill the pages of history books. And if we're advocating for the removal of statues, then perhaps we should at least be consistent and start to talk about the many symbols around the world which offend the Jewish sensibilities, which are a reminder of years of persecution and bloodshed, anti-Semitism. On the facade of the cathedrals throughout Europe, there are obscene depictions of Jews with pigs, most notably Martin Luther's cathedral in Wittenberg, Germany. This is called Judensaw, and it's a popular symbol that was popular throughout Europe for over 600 years. And there's even a map that you can look on the online, the written version of this drasha, which shows the dozens of 35 or so examples of this depiction outside churches of a Jew engaged in obscene actions with pigs. Some of these statues have been taken down, others haven't. One of the iconic symbols of Kiev is a massive monument to Khmelnytsky. Khmelnytsky was the leader of the Cossack uprising, responsible for the massacre of tens of thousands of Jews. In the year 1647, 1648, Tach V'Tat, in Ukraine, Khmelnytsky is revered as a national hero, and in the year 2001, the monument was added to the state register of immovable monuments of Ukraine, indicating its national importance. In Prague, the Charles Bridge, if you've ever been there, and I've seen it myself with my own eyes, spanning the Vlatva River, features 30 statues. But the most notorious of the statues is one of Jesus across a cross, and he's surrounded by Hebrew words that read, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvakos, the words from Yeshayahu, Perek Vav. Elias Bakafin, a Jewish community leader, in the year 1696, as a punishment for disrespecting the cross, is forced to pay for gold-plated letters that read Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh across that symbol. Explanatory plaques in English and Czech and Hebrew are then added in 2009 as a partial apology for the offensive nature of this monument. Thank God I'm not a city planner. I don't have to deal with practicalities of statue removal, heightened emotions on both sides. But the fervor surrounding the issue should give us pause to ask whether or not we are making too much of statues in the first place and forgetting to address the issues they represent. This week, Rav Yitzchak Staum, a rabbi in St. Louis, was photographed standing at the base of a city statue, the statue of Louis XIV, the man responsible for burning the Talmud. And I'll let his words speak for themselves. He wrote, I don't want this statue removed. I want it to remain there so that I could bring my children there with my Talmud and show them that the man tried to destroy this Talmud. He's holding the Talmud in his hand and us. Yet we remain with our Talmud and we study it proudly in the city named for him, St. Louis, Missouri. Statues are nothing more but sticks and stones. It is our actions rather than our monuments that demonstrate our true values. Perhaps Rabbi Staum is onto something. Good Shabbos.